So today's episode of the podcast, we are doing a lovely interview with a Chilean beginner author called Elisa Menz. And she very kindly agreed to be interviewed because she has not yet finished her first draft of her first book. And when I found that out, I thought she would be perfect to speak to. She would be wonderful encouragement to anybody else out there who has yet to start or yet to finish their very own first draft. Welcome to the Turning Readers into Writers podcast, where I teach beginner writers how to find the time and confidence to write their first novel. I'm your host, Emma Desi, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you for joining me today, because if you've been longing to write your novel for forever, this is the place to be. So I'd love to hear your story, really, how you got started in writing.
I've been writing most of my life. I come up with stories all the time, and one way or another, I start putting them on paper, now on computer. I've written short stories, comics, and right now I'm working on video game scripts.
Oh, wow. So you do quite a mix.
Yes, it's not easy. This is my first time writing a book. A
whole book. And you're writing, tell me what type of book you are writing.
This is a fantasy novel. I'm really fond of fantasy genre, so it was kind of natural for me to start writing this, because it's most of the time this is what I read, so I feel really comfortable with this genre.
I was just going to say, because given that this is your first novel, fantasy is a big one to start with. They're not small books. There's a lot involved in the fantasy genre. Did you find that daunting, or is it you're familiar with it because you read it so much that it didn't feel too overwhelming?
Well, I knew from the start I didn't want to write like a trilogy or a saga, because I have commitment problems. So I wanted to write a shorter history and not like a huge book. So from the beginning, it wasn't like I'm going to create a whole universe, a million races, languages. That was not a problem. And from there, I had a lot of experience reading fantasy books. So it was not that hard. It was not a particularly hard theme to write.
Okay, well, that's good. It's not one I know at all, but I see the size of the books and oh my goodness, because I'm such a slow reader. It might take me a year to write.
No, it's a bit daunting. I usually read like 3, 4, 5 books from one story, so it's different. It's not what I wanted to do.
Okay, so tell me, do you work? Do you study? Are you a parent? What do you do kind of outside of writing, or are you lucky enough to write full time?
That would be great if I can do it. I think that would be a really good outcome of all of this. I used to work in hotels and reception office. I haven't been working full time in a few years. I'm doing odd jobs. And recently, with all this Corona thing, I've been writing full time. So I had all the time in the world to dedicate to this book. That's a good thing.
Yes, it's funny. For some people, obviously, it's a very dark time, but for others like ourselves, who are quite happy to be at home and writing, it's actually been a very productive time. So I'm glad to hear you've been able to use it to your advantage.
Yes, I'm so glad I can do this.
So prior to this, though, you were working full-time and writing as well. So how have you managed to balance the two out? How do you combine the two? Do you have certain days that you like to write, or do you try and write as and when you can?
Yes, I don't have a schedule. I'm not really. I cannot coordinate my time that well. So I try to find. I have a couple hours and I sit down and write. What is? I do think this is a good thing, but now that I have all the time in the world, I space out all the time. I sit like at noon and start working from noon to 9, 10 p.m. and I write a chapter, and that is great. I'm having a lot of troubles concentrating now that I have all this time. When I work under pressure, it's a lot better.
Okay. So now that you've got more time, you perhaps aren't as productive as you would be if you had just the 2 hours available to you.
Yes. When you know you only have a couple hours to work, you concentrate, you're on it. Now I'm so relaxed. I'm doing a lot more work, but comparing with the time when I only had a couple hours a day, it's not as productive as I used to
be. I think that's something common to a lot of people. I think that under deadline, we get it done. We know we've only got a certain amount of time, so we work hard to fill that time. Yes, that's the same for me. When I take my kids to school, then I go to a cafe, and I know I just have this 2 hours, so I get down to work and immediately I can start. But here at home, I'm finding it a lot harder to get into the right headspace. Yeah,
there's a lot of distractions also. Working at home is not always that easy.
No. Do you have children, or do you have flatmates, or?
No, I live with my boyfriend and 3 very loud guinea pigs, and those are.
Yes, I saw. Listeners will see your picture when they. I love the picture of you and your guinea pig. I used to have guinea pigs as well.
My firstborn.
Yes, lovely. So normally you have sort of 2 hours to write, and what would you say is your objective in that time? Is it to write one chapter or a certain amount of words, or do you just kind of see what happens?
Well, now that I have more time, I try to achieve a chapter a day. Every time I sit, I try, and most of the time I can accomplish it. I write a chapter, but sometimes you're just not in the zone to write. So I try to at least finish an idea and a scene and go back to it.
And do you edit as you go along, or do you try to get your first draft down and then go back?
I would love to do that, to end the first draft and then go back, but I just don't have the patience. So I go back and go back and back. But I think that's better because as you reread your work so many times, you find little details you can fix and use when you're writing a new scene, a new chapter. So for me, that's what works, to edit as I go.
Okay. I'm the complete opposite. Yes, I like to do the whole first draft and then go back through and add in the details.
That is a good thing, but I can do it. Not for me.
Given the scope of a fantasy novel, do you plot out your novel? Do you have to plot it, or do you find that you just write, you discovery write, so whatever happens, happens?
Well, since this is my very small novel, I'm just beginning to understand how should I work with this. So I'm definitely not a natural plotter. I just write what it comes to me, but coming to a point, I had to start plotting what should I go with this. I couldn't just go with the flow. So it's a bit of a mix right now. I start that chapter and see where it takes me, but at some point I have to stop. And I started to write down names, dates, maps for my book because I was so lost with geography and physics. And at some point, it's really necessary to start plotting.
Yes, I find that I'm a discovery writer as well, but I agree there does sort of come a point, particularly in the middle of the book somewhere, there comes a point where there's so many different threads that a little bit more plotting is needed just to pull them all together, if nothing else. Yeah.
Yes, especially in fantasy books when you usually have a lot of characters and a lot of places where your characters visit. So
how many characters do you have in yours approximately?
Well, I have 3 main characters and around 10. Okay,
wow, that is a lot. Yes, around 10.
It's not an art book, so I think that's an average amount.
Yes. A lot of people to keep track of.
Yes. At some point, I have to go back and start checking what I have problems with the descriptions of a character. A lot of readers told me, we imagined this guy differently, so I had to go back and check. And yes, I have described him differently into different chapters. So it's the kind of thing you have to deal with.
So that's interesting. So you have already sent your book or parts of your story out to beta readers.
Yes.
That's fantastic. And how did you find those beta readers?
I am publishing my book on Inkit. It's a platform to write and read books from all over the world, and I think we all are beginner writers.
Which website was that, sorry?
Inkit.
Inkit. I don't know that one.
Also, I love it.
Do
you know Wattpad? I think it's more popular, Wattpad.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So it's sort of similar to Wattpad, is it? Wattpad, yes, I've heard of. Yes.
I think this is a new site.
And is that one aimed at sci-fi fantasy writers, the sort of epic stories?
No, I read all kind of stories here. Comedy and romance. There's a lot of werewolf stories. It's like a popular theme. But fantasy is not that popular. But lately, I've been reading a lot of books about witches and elves. It's becoming a really interesting platform.
Oh, fantastic. That would be great for my listeners to know about that. So this is somewhere that they can go, they can post up some of their, if they're ready to anyway, if they're feeling confident, they can post up some of their work and get feedback on it. And
it's really useful. It's a really great place to start.
Okay, well, I'll link to that in the show notes. Fantastic. So that's obviously helped you take your story forward. You know that you're on the right track. People are enjoying what you're writing.
Yes.
You've said that you've got a few more chapters left to do. Do you know how the story is going to end?
Absolutely. And I can't wait to finish it. It's going to be so much fun. But right now I'm stuck in a chapter. I'm writing a battle scene. I've never written a battle scene before, so I'm going really slow. I hope I can come up with something soon because I'm really running behind of my schedule.
How are you researching that?
I wish I could say something a little bit more glamorous, but no, it's all Google search.
Okay.
And it's really useful. Once I was so stuck in the scene and I typed, how do you write about love? Just because. And I got so many good answers. It was really, really useful. And you can do that, how to write a fight, a knife fight. And it works.
And someone somewhere has written about that specific thing.
God bless them.
I find that with YouTube. I'm always amazed at what is on YouTube. Recently, I've been researching some Filipino culture because my next story is based on the Filipino community, and there was a few things I wanted to know, and I thought, well, I'll just see on YouTube, see if there's anybody posted anything about hand gestures particularly. And there you go, you've got 4 or 5 videos, people doing videos about Filipino hand gestures. I never would have thought it. It's amazing what is up on the internet.
Is this real or is someone watching me?
Amazing. So my audience, as I've mentioned to you, they are all people who are at the beginning stages of writing their novel. Lots of people, before they actually sit down and get started, struggle with confidence and worry about if they have what it takes to write a book, if they have the skills to be a writer. You've told me that you've written quite a bit of things now. You know, I know that you wrote comics and short stories. Did you feel nervous at the beginning about writing a full-length novel, or did you, from your previous experience, did you think, okay, no, I know I can do this, I've just got to sit down and do it?
Well, it's definitely something that makes you nervous. And I wanted to write this to show it to the world. It's not something I wanted to write to myself. The first step was to write a few chapters and show it to someone I really trusted. I have a first opinion that was really good, and I had a second opinion from another friend. And then I found out about Inkit, and so other authors are writing there, and they were in the same place as me. So that gave me the confidence to know that there was other people writing and everyone had the same struggles, and there is a really nice community there. We all help each other.
Mm-hmm.
There's always someone that goes a little bit tough on you, but that's useful. It's really important to receive feedback on your stories and to be able to to read between the lines and take the useful out of it. It's not, if someone reads your book and says, I'm not liking this because this and this, you have to put the bad things behind and learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of times when you don't get great feedback, but as long as it's useful feedback, it's good.
Yes, I've talked about this before, and other things about how as writers we have to be resilient, because at some stage most of us want to publish or have somebody else read our story, so we will be critiqued at some point. It's good to get it done at the beginning when you're just starting the story, and although it can hurt and you feel very protective towards your story, you sort of have to acknowledge that feeling and accept it, and then move on from it and be, think objectively about the person's comments. Is it a fair comment? Does it need to be something that you do need to look at? Or if they simply say, I don't like it, well, that's subjective then, and there's nothing you can do about that. But if somebody says to you, this character needs a bit more, or I didn't quite believe this scene, then that's something you can work with, something that you can improve. And it's, as you say, something helpful, not just a criticism. It's something that's to try and help you make your story better. So it's important to have that resilience and try not to take it personally. I've struggled with that myself.
No way, I think we all do. And at some point I realized that even though you get good advice from some people, you have to be confident enough to realize that maybe it's good advice, but it's not what you want to do with your story. So you don't have to take every advice.
Mm-hmm. Such good words there. Yes, you don't have to. It's your story. You've got to make it your story, not somebody else's. Yes. I like that. So you've nearly finished this one. Would you like to tell us anything about the story?
Yes, I always struggle to tell about my story. I need to practice this one. It's a standalone novel, and it's set in a fantasy world, which is covered in a massive forest. In this forest, you have all kinds of magical creatures. And there is a human kingdom that's surrounded by this forest, and you have a small human community that is not allowed to go into the forest, and the creatures in the forest cannot interact with humans. It's forbidden.
Okay.
And the story follows a young woman called Maeve. She's struggling with what her family has chosen for her, to marry a neighbor. She wants to have her own life. She wants to try to help her family and her people in her own way, but she's not allowed. And at some point, she comes across one of the guardians of the forest, and they start traveling together, and a lot of things happen in the middle. Then she's forced to go into the forest and meet a whole new world and a lot of new creatures, and her life changes completely.
Okay. Oh, sounds amazing.
Really sure. Thank you. I'm not sure I can tell anymore without spoiling my book. I do that a lot.
So adventure ensues. She enters the forest and adventure happens. Yeah.
Yes. There's a lot of nice meetings there. And I try to, since this is such a big place, there's a lot of magical creatures with like the classic elves, orcs, dragons. She doesn't meet every single creature in the forest, but I also try to include some creatures of my own. I created,
fantastic.
My favorites are the blood hummingbirds. Those hummingbirds that drink blood.
Oh.
There's a glimpse of them in the book. I try to include little things like that. So it's not like classic fantasy.
So that's nice. You've added your little twist and your little sort of something that is distinctive to you and your story and your world building.
Yes, I think a lot of people on Inkit are struggling with writing the same thing someone else wrote before. It's not easy to be original right now because there's a lot of books, a lot of stories in the world. So I think this is a good way to be a bit different, to add your own touch to the story.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it sounds nice. I like the natural element of it as well, and that it's taking place in the forest. There's lots of room there for dark meetings and scary stuff. Yeah.
Yes, I know. I love the idea of making it so massive because anything can be found there.
And so your plans, you mentioned that you knew you wanted this book to be out in the world. You weren't doing it just for you. So do you have plans to look for an agent, or do you have plans to independently publish?
I think I prefer indie publish at this point. I'm not against the idea to find an agent in the future, but right now I'm going to focus on indie publishing.
And is there a reason for that?
I know some writers here in Chile, and I don't know is this something like specific from Latin America or Chile, but their stories with editorials are terrible. So scary. It's almost like they have a bit of luck and they manage to land the contract with an editorial. So
but it's so hard.
Yes, I imagine so. I don't know if I want to go through that with my first book right now. I'm going to try to do it on my own, and maybe in the future I be more confident and I try that one.
So you've mentioned this one is a standalone. Will you look to write another book in the same genre?
Yes, I'd love that. Actually, a couple of friends have asked me, I don't follow the same story, but maybe I can do another story in the same forest.
Yes, there's a nice connection.
I'm doing short stories right now about it.
So that might evolve into something.
Yes, I didn't plan that, but it happened. So I love how organic this all is. It's a lot of potential for this story.
Now, you mentioned that you're in Chile.
Yes.
So, and I'm guessing from your accent that English is not your native language.
No, could you tell? No, I'm writing in English. That's really the best or the worst idea I had.
So I have some other people in my community who they live in English-speaking countries, but English is not their first language, and it's one of the things that makes them very nervous about starting to write a longer piece. What prompted you to decide to write in English, and what advice might you have for somebody else who is nervous about writing in their second language?
Well, there are two main reasons for that. I'm writing in English because there's a bigger audience in English, and especially for fantasy stories, it happens that writers in the Chilean writers and Latin American writers, fantasy books don't have as much followers who read English books. Their stories are just as good, but I don't know why that happens. It's a weird phenomenon here. So that's one of the main reasons. And the other is I tried writing this book in Spanish, and I really didn't like the way I sounded. I have no idea why.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, it's really weird. I guess it's because I'm used to hear more stories in English, so the language for me sounds better. Eventually, I'm going to have to translate it to Spanish because my grandma wants to read it. But I didn't. It didn't work at first.
Okay.
It's a bit weird.
And forgive me for my ignorance, but is Chilean Spanish the same as in the other Spanish-speaking countries in South America, and the same as the Spanish in Spain?
Technically, yes. When you speak with a Chilean, you understand half of it.
Okay.
It happened to me. I'm originally from Bolivia, and I came to Chile, and it was like another language. It took a while to figure out this, just because we have odd words.
Right. I see. But the sort of business Spanish, or the common Spanish is the same as Spain
Yes.
Spanish, and then each country has its own.
Exactly. We might change a few words, but we can all speak with each other perfectly.
Now, thank you so much for speaking to me. I know that my listeners will find it really helpful and inspirational to speak to somebody else who is at that beginning bit of their novel writing journey, especially somebody writing in a second language and who is writing such a big book. I know that they'll find that really encouraging, and it will help them know that they can do it too. But if any of my audience are science fiction fans, fantasy fans, and they would like to find out more about you, where can they do that? Where can they find out about you and your writing?
Well, right now I have this book published on Inkit. My username is Maya Serrana. I don't know if you have to spell that later, but I only have it published there.
Cool. And do you have a website, or are you on social media at all?
I'm starting to work on my social media for writing, but right now it's not that impressive. So probably Instagram. I think that's the best place to contact me.
Okay, I'll put a link to that too. Cool.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, that was great. Thank you very much for speaking to me.
Thank you for inviting me. This was fun.
Wasn't that great to hear from Elisa? She was so open and so friendly. I really, really enjoyed our chat. I particularly liked finding out how she got into writing and why she chose to write fantasy. And I like the honesty with which she talks about the fact it can be really hard to keep motivated when you have all day to write, instead of having small focused periods of writing in the day where you have to get the job done. I thought that was very honest of her, and I think she's probably not alone there. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I certainly did, and I can't wait to see you again next time. Take care. Bye bye. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found that helpful and inspirational. Now, don't forget to come on over to Facebook and join my group, Turning Readers into Writers. It is especially for you if you are a beginner writer who is looking to write their first novel. If you join the group, you will also find a free cheat sheet there called 3 Secret Hacks to Write with Consistency. So go to emmadesi.com/turning readers into writers, hit join. Can't wait to see you in there. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.